Big Lez's League, an all rugby league experience.
Hey legends, Big Les here from the Big Lez's Rugby League podcast. Just want to come on here and do a quick little disclaimer. Any signings that have happened over the past 2 weeks, we will not be aware about on the podcast. We did record this one 2 weeks back, and I've scheduled it to come out over the next few weeks. So any signings that have happened in the past 2 to 3 weeks, we will not be aware of those signings on the podcast. Without further ado, though, let's get straight into it. Part 3 of the season reviews. Can't wait.
Cowboys. Let's touch on the Cowboys. They finished 5th this year, 15 wins, 9 losses. They obviously scored 657 points. Points against was 568. That's compared to last season where they sat 11th, mate. Talk to me about the Cowboys. What an improvement.
What an improvement, but what a weird team they are. They just kind of snuck under the radar and ended up in 5th somehow. On paper, they are one of the best teams going around, I think, particularly attacking-wise. Like, they've got some serious strike weapons there. But, yeah, very solid season from the Cowboys. It looked a bit shaky there at different points. They were getting blown off the park in some games and having some dramas, but managed to string a couple of important games together and, ended up getting right up in the 8.
100%, mate. It really stood up when it counted too. And a lot of that came down to Tom Dearden, who obviously earned himself a spot in that Kangaroo side. But also for me, I thought that Scott Drinkwater was huge this year. Just some of his individual efforts in this side, carrying himself well at fullback, playing that second 5'8" sort of role at fullback there, which has become more and more popular. We're seeing more and more of it from fullbacks, over the next few years as well. Just some of those young guys coming through. You can sort of pinpoint those guys that play that second 5'8" sort of role. But certainly, I think that both of those guys were big reasons as to why they were so successful this year.
Oh, absolutely. And I think on top of that, like, just the heart that some of those players have, they just go so hard every single week, particularly Tom Dearden's. Scotty Drinkwater, he can be, when he's on, he's one of the best out there by far. But yeah, he can, I find, be a little bit hit and miss. But like you said, playing that almost like a second or third half type of thing is just, he links up very well through the back line. But no, they've had an interesting season, and their forwards as well, I think, have been outstanding for them.
They certainly have, mate. They certainly have. And particularly as well, when there's a lot of question marks around their forward pack too, and how that was going to shape up throughout the year, and just some of the roles and the progressions of some of their forwards. We'll talk about it in a second, mate. We'll get into some of the stats first, the juicy stuff for the year. Points, they scored 27 points per game on average, which is the 3rd highest amount of points scored per game out of any team. Great stat there. Line breaks, 5.9 line breaks per game, which is 3rd as well. Tackle bust, this is where it gets interesting. For tackle bust, they were 32.5 per game, which is down to 11th. Meters per game, they were the 2nd highest in meters per game out of any team, with 1,511, which is huge. Offloads, 7.2 per game, which is 15th. Errors, 10.6 per game, which is the 4th highest. Completion rate was 78%, which was 12th. It seems that a lot of teams are completing around that 78 mark. In regards to defense and discipline stats, points conceded, 23.5 per game. Missed tackles, 33.9 per game. Both of those 10th in the competition. Penalties conceded, 5 per game, which was 13th. And then sin bins, 7, which was 7th in the competition. 0 send-offs. What stat stands out to you the most?
Oh, it's between the just the all-out attacking stats that you see there in your highlight and in defense. There was something throughout the season for them. They just seemed to have dramas defensively. There was a few probably factors with that, but they were a bit of a glass cannon in a way. They could put the points on, but when it come to defending them, they weren't having a whole lot of success. They managed to, again, string it together, but their attacking stats, I think, stand out big time. They were really able to strike when they wanted, really. And if you have a look at that team, you can see exactly why.
Yeah, totally, mate. They were definitely always going to be that touch footy side, that really sparky attack sort of side. But when it came down to the defense, it was a bit of an issue towards the start of the year. And it was a reason why a lot of people were saying the Cowboys were probably going to miss the 8 this year too. That just the defense this season. I'll tell you what, though, I think a big thing for them in some close games, and we spoke about it at the start when we talked about this guy's impact going to the Dragons, but Valentine Holmes and his goal kicking was huge in some tight contests, especially when they couldn't defend games. They could get that extra 2 points on, and they knew that they were going to get it, especially at the back end of the year. He was just ice cold with that goal kicking.
Blake does not miss. Take it back to halfway because he was just slotting them left, right, and centre. The amount of points that teams do leave out there with their goal kicking sometimes is astounding. Especially you notice it in those really high scoring games where there's a lot of tries. Both teams might score 6, 7, 8 tries, whatever, and you got one team that's kicked every single one, like the Cowboys might have, and another team that's missed it all. The points difference ends up being quite a bit. So you're right, when you've got someone like Val Holmes, you can throw the ball to. You're pretty happy with the confidence he'll give you slotting those pretty much every time. So he was great.
He was great, mate. And I think a big thing for me that stands out, and even just looking at an image of him now on the slideshow I've got up in front of me, fuck, he put on a ton of size going into this year. He is a unit, and particularly when you compare him to his Sharks days at fullback, and then the size of him now at centre, he has put on a ton of size. We saw that last year with a lot of his form, but this year even as well in those sparks and those good games that he had, his size and just his physicality as well and his running game was a big part as to the success that they had on that left-hand side. He had a big season. Obviously it was up and down, and the Origins series wasn't the best for him defensively, but I do think he had a strong season. When you look at the whole season in a scope, I think he had a pretty decent year.
Yeah, for sure. No, I think it all kind of rounded out for him. Had a couple of hiccups along the way, but I think overall, like you were saying, did manage to put together quite a good season, and it's definitely a massive pickup as well for the Dragons.
Totally a huge pickup for the Dragons. We spoke about that before. But for me, I think it's a huge loss for the Cowboys, particularly when you're losing himself. You're losing Kyle Felt. You're losing big Kule Kefu Finefuyaki, who was a great impact off the bench and obviously a great guy to have as depth for your back row. You also lose Chad Townsend, who has a lot of experience around the spine, and Jakey Granville, who we don't know where he's going to end up yet. It sounds like Super League, but there's no club confirmed for him at this current time. But some big losses in regards to the back line with Kyle Felt and Val Holmes walking out the door next year. Obviously, Peter Hiku leaving the year before too.
Yeah, there's a lot of losses coming out the door. Just the experience there, like those players that you listed, your big Chatty Townsend, your Jake Granville, Kyle Felville Holmes, they're all players that have been there, done that. So that's a lot of experience that they're losing, but they do have some, pretty handy players to fill those spots. Especially the back line. They got some young guns for sure.
They obviously have Carl Lawton coming in, but it's currently their only signing other than Kai O'Donnell, who they've signed from the Lee Leopards. Kyle Lawton, it's going to be interesting to see where he slots into this team. I think it's a decent signing to have as depth because he can just cover so many positions, but where he exactly fits into the side, the only position I can sort of say with it, the slightest amount of confidence would be 14. What about yourself?
Yeah, I'm the exact same. I think that'd probably be the position if they're going to stick him anywhere. Like you said, with the versatility options, that's probably going to be the
go. We'll have to wait and see, but that's probably the most likely spot. Mate, I think the most, relieving bit of, just watching the Pacific Championships over the past few days, Robert Derby, huge performance for PNG over the weekend. Obviously had nearly 300 meters there. Obviously had a really good intercept try. He's got some real speed on him. Obviously, I believe played one game throughout the year this year alongside Zach Laybut. They shared an edge for one game there throughout the year. But obviously, when there's a lot of guys walking out the door, it's a really great guy to have coming through the ranks. And he probably will start on that right wing, taking the place of Kyle Felt.
Yeah, for sure. I haven't seen the most of him play, but from what I have seen, like you said, he's got that speed, bit of power, and good problem to have when you're getting players leaving your club. Some of those youngsters that are coming through, are going to be competitive competitive for those positions. So we'll be excited to see if he can bring some big stuff to that team next season.
Who was your shining light for this year for the Cowboys?
Oh, mine would probably have to be Tommy Beard. He was just so good. He was so good. I'd throw Ruben Cotter up there as well. I think both of those players really wore their heart on their sleeves and just left everything out there every single time they pulled that jersey on. But Tommy did, and he's just getting better and better, and we're seeing him, reaping the rewards of that. Whether he's playing in Origin or he's playing now for Australia, just shows the confidence that the selectors having him and his ability. And yeah, I think he really is one of those players that are built for the big moments. So yeah, he's just getting better and better. And yeah, really stood out for me.
Yeah, Tommy Dearden's definitely probably the front runner for that shining light. For me, I've got two. I've got one that's been there all season. We sort of spoke about it before. And then I've got one as well who's come in midway through the season and had a huge impact. Obviously, Scott Drinkwater for me would be my shining light there. He's been outstanding at fullback. We've spoken about him. Now that I think about it too, I probably have a third one in there as well, and that's Reece Robson. Huge season from Reece Robson. Obviously, looking down that Origin 9 spot too after a big series last year as well. But just this season, some really consistent form. And then the guy that came in midway through the year is big Jake Clifford. What an impact he had coming into this team when there was a lot of concern around Chad and his defense. Big Jakey Clifford not only solves the defensive issue, but he adds a really strong long kicking game, which is probably another thing the Cowboys need if they were to be a competitive side in this competition.
Yeah, he's one that kind of come out of the woodwork, wasn't he? A lot of people probably wouldn't have really expected that, but it ended up working very, very well in the Cowboys' favour. Kind of was out of the NRL for a little bit doing his own thing and come back into it. Like you said, that size helps a bit. Good body to have in defence and, the kicking game to go along with it. So, yeah, he ended up solving a lot of problems for them.
He certainly did, mate. He certainly did. And it's a really great example of a guy that goes over to the Super League to just work on his game. He comes back and he blows us off the park. Jake Clifford, absolutely outstanding. Scotty Drinkwater, the impact. Reece Robson with a big year. Ruben Cotter just personifies toughness. To start his career as a hooker, to bulk up like he has, and then to play this roaming 13 role in this side, he has been outstanding.
Yeah, he gets plus 10 speed and power from that beautiful mullet he's got going all the time. But yeah, no, Cotter, I just love watching him play. He's just an absolute gun. Whether it's for Queensland or for Cowboys or whoever else, like he's so consistent, so tough and powerful when he runs, and yeah, just really gets the troops going. So yeah, love to see him out there.
100%, mate. 100%. So good to see him out there week in, week out. And then, while the stats might not always tell the story, when you actually watch the games that he plays every single week, he just never, goes down in that toughness. He always just personifies toughness, aggression. Defensively, he always tries to insert himself into a game that way, regardless of the performance he's having in attack. So Ruben Cotter, massive year this year. Obviously, obviously signed till 2028 too. So they've locked him in long term, which is great to see. One guy I do want to talk about, obviously losing Val Holmes and that experience. It's great to see Viliami Vaila have the year that he had at right centre.
Yeah, no, he went well. Definitely another good pickup for the Cowboys over the last little bit. Yeah, no, he's just really found his own, really went into his stride. Glad that they managed to find a position for him because he's just got so much talent. So, yeah, I think he's going to be a staple moving forward for them.
100%, mate. I am so excited to see how he goes going into next year. I think that he's going to be an absolute weapon. They've also got Laybutt walking into this side next year after, spending the year out with injury. I don't know exactly the time frame on him, when about he's coming back in throughout the year. But certainly a guy that when he does come back, he'll be fighting for a first grade spot, depending on how he does actually come back into this side as well.
Yeah, they've got a few options there, and I guess that's going to be a bit of a headache for Todd Payton to, figure out when he is fit and firing again. because he was playing great footy until obviously coming up with the injury. So yeah, we'll have to, I guess, see what happens there. But yeah, they've got plenty of options, which is always good for them.
Where do you see the Cowboys finishing in 2025?
Oh, see, personally, I'd love to see them fall, but my actual thoughts, I've got a little bit of what they did to the Broncos in 2015. I'll hold with me forever, but I've got them. I think they're going to make the 8. I think they're going to go onwards and upwards. I reckon pretty very similar to this season. I reckon 5th to 7th for the Cowboys. I can see them slotting in.
Yeah, 5th to 7th. I like. I think I'm going to copy and paste that, mate. 57th sounds like a good little bracket for them. I think that's exactly where they finish. Talk to me about the Sharkies. Big season for the Sharkies. Obviously, a lot of dramas around Nico Hines, a lot of noise around Nico Hines. Where does he fit? He's not a 7. He is a 7. He has these big games. Then obviously he doesn't have the biggest games as well. Will Kennedy has also been a talking point of the off-season. Does he keep his spot there at fullback? There's been plenty of shining lights, which we'll get to in a second, but just talk to me about the Sharkies and their season, still managing to get into the top 4 with all the dramas that they've had throughout the year.
Yeah, no, I think they did really well to hang on to a top 4 spot after it all. They started off the season absolutely firing. They were one of the form teams for a very long time. They were sitting in first, I think, for some period as well. And then everything kind of started to unfold. All the stuff with Nico was a massive thing as well. And like I said, with Kennedy, I think he's your fullback. I don't really see that change. I think maybe he just had a little bit of a slower season and whatever else. But then the stuff with Nico, that bloke just needs a holiday. I think at this point, just a bit of time away from the game to chill out for a bit. He'll come good. I think he's definitely a 7 as well. I don't know where the chat is. It's just one of those. They need someone to direct anything at, and unfortunately, he's the whipping boy for it. So yeah, that's where Nico's landed.
Mate, he needs a club paid trip to Ibiza. I'll tell you what, he just needs some time away. I agree. Obviously managed to finish 4th still. And I think a big part of that as well, and we'll talk about it in a second, but to have Trindle obviously going into that 7 jersey, to sit Hines back in the 6 for the last few games of the season and going into that final series, and to get them into that grand final qualifier as well. I think that was so important for Nico to just take all of that weight off his shoulders. And I feel like next year it's going to be a similar story. I think we see Trindle in the 7, Hines in the 6, and Trindle taking a lot more of the responsibilities like the goal kicking and stuff like that. And you really just let Hines, work his way back in and, not so much work his way back in, but more so just, get that confidence back, know what it's like to not have that pressure on you week in, week out, like he did at the Storm, obviously, when he was just coming in and filling in and doing some incredible things.
Yeah, and I think that also, in a weird way, plays to the season that he got the Dally M as well. Not really seeing him as a 7. We didn't have these crazy expectations for him, or people didn't have these crazy expectations that he does now. So I think it is really handy having a guy like Trindle there that can alleviate that pressure, has a reasonably good kicking game. Nico, his running game is definitely a strong suit. So 6 works perfectly fine for him. Just frees him up, and he's such a confidence player. And, those different periods of time, he's had that hits of the confidence, and you can see how much that affected his game. So if they're able to just free him up, all the head noise involved with all that, and just allow him to play his footy and get into the season, get into the game, then I think they're going to reap the rewards from it.
Yeah, totally, mate. He just needs to play pressure free. That's going to be the big thing going into next year. But as I've said a number of times this podcast, we're here to talk about this year, not next year. So let's get into a bit of a review. They obviously finished 4th, mate. They had 16 wins and 8 losses. Points scored 653, points against 431. That is compared to last season. Pretty similar year, to be honest. 6th. They finished last year with 14 wins and 10 losses, so not too much of a difference there at all. In regards to the attacking stats, we'll fly through these a little bit. In terms of points scored, 25.7. They were 5th for points per game. Line breaks, 5 per game. They were 7th. Tackle bust, 37.9 per game. They were 4th for tackle bust. Meters, 1,464. They were 5th for meters. Offloads, 8.9 per game. That's 9th. So in a mid sort of discussion point. Errors, 10.1 per game. That was 9th. Completion rate, 79%, like every other team in the competition. That's around that sort of middle mark. Defense and discipline. Points conceded, 19 per game, which is 14th. So that's pretty good there defensively from the Sharkies. Missed tackles, 33.9. That's 11th. So again, that mid sort of echelon there. Penalties conceded, 6 per game, which is the second amount, like the least penalties, I believe, per game, or second most. I'll double check that stat, bloke in the bar. And then sin bins, they were 6th, so 11th in regards to the rest of the league as well. What stat stands out to you the most?
This one is a little bit weird because I feel like their stats point them towards a team maybe a little bit lower in the top 8. I wouldn't say there's anything that really stands out super crazy for the Sharks, to be honest. One that is impressive is tackle breaks, but I guess you probably get that when you've got a guy like Talakai out there just running over people for fun. But yeah, no, I wouldn't say there's a whole lot that really jumps out for me, to be honest.
I think a big part of that as well was the fact that they did have that period where, they didn't look as impressive, as what a lot of other teams in the competition did. They obviously had that drama with Nico. You actually look at their season snapshot. It's very impressive. They obviously won the first 2 games of the season against the Warriors and the Dogs. They had the loss to the Tigers, which was just bizarre. Then they won against the Raiders, 36-22. The bye. Then they have a 6-game winning streak from South, Cowboys, Raiders, Dragons, Storm, and Roosters. They lose to the Panthers 42-0, which was a big shock to a lot of people. They thought that game was going to be a lot closer. They obviously lose to the Eels the following week, 34-22. They beat the Broncos. They then have a 3-game losing streak against the Dolphins, the Bulldogs, and the Titans. They beat the Tigers, and, bloody oath, you would have thought they would have won that game for sure, because it would have been very concerning if they didn't. 58-6 that scoreline there. They have the bye. They lose against the Cowboys. They have a 4-game winning streak, which I think was so pivotal in them, keeping that spot. Obviously, South, Titans, Knights, and Dragons. They lose against the Warriors. They win against Manly. They lose against the Storm. They win against the Cowboys, and then they lose against the Panthers in that preliminary final as well. Look, it's a pretty impressive run sheet, to be honest. Despite the year that they had looking at them and watching them, it's a very impressive run sheet.
Yeah, no, they definitely went well, especially when you put it out like that. They started their season, like I was saying, particularly hot. Outside of the hiccup with the Tigers there, that was a little bit of an anomaly that happened, which is a bit rough. But yeah, they finished strong. They finished really strong. Bit unlucky that they ended up coming up against the Penrith Panthers side right at the end there, which they performed relatively okay with, I think, as well. It's just that bloody Penrith thing where they'll be cruising along most of the game, and then all of a sudden they'll score 3 tries in 10 minutes and make it look like he got pumped. But no, the Sharks have been going well, and they have been for the last couple of seasons. Fitzgibbons is obviously doing a really great job with them, and their defense has been one of the better teams out there as well. I think a few people knock them a little bit for maybe not being necessarily the most exciting team going around, but yeah, no, they're playing great footy.
They are playing great footy, mate. And they particularly had a really strong period at the start of the year, as you were saying. And then towards the back end, they sort of started to string a few wins together as well. Really solid season. Obviously, they lost Wade Graham, which was huge. Obviously, he retired at the end of last year. They lost Connor Tracy to the Dogs, which was huge, particularly with how well he's done at the Dogs as well. It's a huge loss. Matty Moylan, which was a huge loss and a huge discussion point for them at the start of the year. Yes, defensively, he might have not been the best, but it's so much experience you have in the halves. Him and Nico were going so well together. Him in the halves with Nico, that was the best Nico had played. So losing a guy like Matt Moylan, I think, was huge. Just Dale Finucane obviously retiring throughout the year as well, I think was a big thing for them. They do, though, get Addin Fanua-Blake next year, which it's probably the one thing that they've needed to be an absolute powerhouse.
Yeah, it is that kind of missing piece to the puzzle, isn't it? Real, kind of almost top 3 forward to come into that team, and especially the way that they do like to play, really kind of knocking down the front door. you're not really going to get a better guy than Adam Fanua-Blake to do that. You know, the experience and power that he brings into that role. So yeah, it's going to be really exciting for them. And yeah, they've had a couple of interesting standouts this season, a few that have emerged for them, which have just been wonderful. So yeah, very keen to see what they can do.
Mate, they are absolutely stacked up in the centres, but one centre for me that stands out, and that's, grinded his way into this side. I was shocked he didn't get Rookie of the Year after Lockie Galvin was ruled out, but Kale Iro, what a season. That's my shining light in spades.
Yep, no, I've got the exact same one. Yeah, he couldn't buy his way into the team, could he, for some time there? And all you heard was just how good he was going. In the reserve side, just running over people for fun, and comes from a legendary lineage of players. Well, his father in particular, but yeah, and he took that opportunity and ran with it. He has been brutal. He was devastating in attack. I loved actually watching him play. He was just so physical. And yeah, it was surprising he didn't actually pop that Rookie of the Year. He was great.
Well, mate, the only reason he's missed out on Kiwi selection is due to injury. He would have been in that side if he didn't get injured there. Really strong season himself, but I guess the second shining light you've got to throw in there as well, which was a super unexpected year, and he'd probably be one of the smokies for that back row of the year spot. Britton Nicola. What a season from Britton Nicola.
Yeah, no, he stood up throughout the entire season. He's always been up there as one of the best ones, but this season in particular, exactly like you said, he was a shining light for sure. Just the lines that he run, hit so hard in defense, like he was just great fun to watch. Really surprising, I guess. He just kind of just took it to that next level. He just seems to be getting better and better. So yeah, don't want to be anywhere near him if you're running, that's for sure.
Mate, it's almost like having a second halfback, just with his ball playing as well. He can really find those outside backs very, very well. He's got a great spiral and a great offloading ability as well. So when you have a guy like that sitting in the back row who can run those lines well, who can run with that toughness as well, he's not the biggest back row you've ever seen, but he's certainly one of the toughest. And then to have that ball playing ability as well and that game recognition as well, like a half would, he's just a real full package, Britton Nicola, and a great season from him. Again, you talk about shining lights in this side as well. It was great to see Jesse Ramian have a big year, and another guy that was sort of close to Origin contention as well.
Yeah, no, he's been going well. I think him and Nick are both like they kind of almost in a package in a way. The way they've been performing, they just keep getting better and better. They've been so consistent and solid for the Sharks over the last couple of seasons. So yeah, no, it's great to see them going well. If it wasn't for some absolute world class players, like you said, in some of those rep sides, that they would be right there.
100%, mate. 100%. Now, there's a bit of a run sheet here of players that I think could be in contention for our shining light, for sure. I guess you could call this the honourable mentions. CSC Vitalakai, Ronaldo Mulatalo, Cam McInnes there at 13 was outstanding. Trindle, when he moved into the 7, was just impeccable. Blake Brayley at 9 was great all year, and you could argue was smoky there for Origin too. You also had in this team Daniel Atkinson when he came into the side, how important he was in certain stages of the year, and single-handedly as the only half in the team beating the Storm was just insane.
Yeah, no, he was insane, and I actually had him listed down as well. He was one that just kind of come out of nowhere as well. It's a bit of a shame. There's not really anywhere he can necessarily fit into the team, I'd say, at this point, which is a little bit tricky. I think he might have played a game or so on the wing. I forgot. He might have. A little bit tricky when you got Nico and Trindle there in the halves. But I guess if anything happens to those two, having him on call was huge. But yeah, what he did against Storm was massive.
Well, mate, he actually came through great, I believe, as a fullback, which I think is where this Will Kennedy chat has sparked. Obviously, him in his spot. Trying to fit Daniel Atkinson into this team. Again, similar to the Carl Lawton chat, I think the only spot you can really fit him in at the moment is 14, but very keen to see where he fits into this outfit maybe later in the year if things aren't working or if there needs to be a change in that fullback or in the halves sort of thing as well. The other thing that was sort of being thrown up as well was Nico Hines going to fullback, and obviously Atkinson moving into the halves there. I think no matter where you put Hines, 7, 6, or 1, you're going to get the same thing out of him regardless, which is just that great running game, setting up your outside man. He roams both sides of the ruck very well anyway. I feel like you're getting the same thing regardless. So just keep him in that 6 jersey for now, see what happens. If you need to move him, but you're only really just changing the number on his back rather than the position he's playing in this team.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. He very much does play the same kind of footy wherever you're going to put him. It does free him up a little bit, sure. If you had him there at fullback, lets him roam around a little bit. He'd be there to set up everyone all day. But yeah, I think like you said, he's changed the number at that point.
Yeah, 100%, mate. It would be very interesting to see what happens there with the Sharkies, but I imagine it'll be a very similar team, other than obviously Hines and Nico swapping jumpers and Hines going into that number 6 sort of role. Mate, the last one I want to bring up, and it's obviously because he's leaving at the end of this year, obviously from November 1st, which is quite soon, but Jack Williams, huge loss for the Sharkies for me. The season that he's had, I think it's a great pickup for Parramatta.
Yeah, no, they've done well there. It is a little bit surprising that they let him go, but I guess it's one of those things you can only fit so many people into that squad. They've got quite a bit of talent there in the back row, like we've been talking about. So, yeah, it's just one of those things you can't have them all, unfortunately.
Yeah, totally, mate. Totally. And I think that he's probably going to be one of those guys, maybe 5 or 6 years down the track, that you're probably talking about for rep duties too. He's just got so much heart on his sleeve for whatever club he plays for. We've only seen him play for the Sharks, but I imagine he's going to do the same thing at the Parramatta Eels. But absolute weapon, killed it this year playing middle forward. Keen to see where he sort of fits into the frame for the Parramatta Eels. We'll talk about that more though in the preview. Talk to me about where you see the Sharks sitting next season. Is it the same sort of story, or do they fall off?
I think they might have a slight decline. Ever so slightly. So I think anywhere between 4 to 7-ish around about. I think they're going to be up in there in the top 8 again, probably cracking for that 4th spot. But yeah, I reckon around there is probably right for them.
Mate, give me 5 to 10, to be honest. I'm taking a 5-point thing. I think they could just fall out potentially, depending on what happens with the halves and with Nico and with everything going on there. Will Kennedy, if there's multiple changes throughout the year and they sort of shit the bed a bit, which I'm sure Craig Fitzgibbon won't do, they could drift out a little bit. I imagine just with how the comp's evening out and some other teams that we've talked about in this podcast, as well as contenders for top 8 and top 4, I do feel like the Sharks might slide down a little bit, not even due to form, but more so just due to that comp evening out. But for me, give me 5 to about 10. I think that they could drop out. They could sit in the top 8 again. I think they will be in and around the top 8 conversation regardless. Let's talk about the Sydney Poosters, mate. Obviously, finished the year in 3rd, 16 wins, 8 losses, 738 points scored, 463 conceded. Talk to me about the Roosters. What a season without Sam Walker to finish 3rd. They lost Sam Walker, Brandon Smith heading into finals. Hectic season, but a really heroic season nevertheless.
Yeah, the old Roosters. God, they went well, didn't they? They were just a joy to watch. I reckon they scored half those points that you mentioned against the Dragons, though, to be honest. They were just a powerhouse attacking team. Really surprised. Like, I don't know. People have been talking about them for many, many seasons to be right up there, and I think it's the first one in a little bit now since they kind of run a few years ago that they've actually maybe lived up to it a bit. I think they would have been interested to see how they would have gone with Cheese still in that team if he didn't go down and Sam Walker. I don't know if they maybe would have gone all the way, but outstanding season either way.
Mate, I think they get into the grand final if Sam Walker was still in there, just with the trajectory that he was on and the form that he was on towards the back end of the year. We'll talk about that in a second, but I do think that they probably would have been very, very close to getting into a grand final. If not, they get in there. But yeah, Roosters, huge season for them. Obviously, attacking wise, they were the best attacking team in the competition this year, with 29.9 points per game on average. That's the best in the comp. They were also 2nd in line breaks, having an average of 6.3 per game. And then they were first for tackle bust with 42.5 tackle bust per game. Huge attacking stats. They were 11th for meters, though. 1,430 meters per game. Offloads, 11.3 per game. So second for offloads. In regards to errors, 9.9 per game, which is 12th. So not the worst sign there. 80% completion rate, 7th. Really good there from the Roosters. Attacking wise, defensively, this is where things get a little bit interesting. Defensively, the Roosters, 20.6 points per game. Conceded defensively there. So that's 13th. Missed tackles, they had 33.2 per game missed tackles, which is the 12th highest. So not too bad there when you look at the Roosters defensively this year, to be honest. Now, there was a big talking point around the Roosters' discipline being the main reason as to why they, didn't have the best success throughout the back end of the year, or at least in that midpoint of the year, or while they could have maybe fallen out of the 8. But 7 per game in regards to penalties. That's the most amount of penalties on average per game. So discipline, definitely a big talking point there. Sin bins, 10. So that was third. And then they had 2 send-offs this year. So they're the first for send-offs and they're third for sin bins. So, mate, discipline, a big shock there for the Roosters.
Yeah, absolutely. Shout out to Jared Hargraves for the Sidbid stats there, because I dare say he'd make up about half of those. But yeah, defense, like I said, it was a big chat throughout the season, and the discipline throughout. I kind of noted that down. They just have the tendency to fall asleep, I found, a little bit. They'd play 60 good minutes and just kind of maybe die off a little bit towards the end. And you saw that in some of the games against like a Manly, things like that, where they either got run down or it become a lot closer than it probably should have been. I think there was even a game against the Titans where they blew the Titans out for a little bit, and the Titans kind of like snuck right back in it, where they really shouldn't be there. The attacking stats, they just speak for themselves. You have a look at that lineup, and it's just ridiculous. It is crazy that the team they had. The forwards rotation, that was elite. Offloads as well, when you got guys in there, like your Tyrrell May, I thought was really good for that. He was handy. Spencer Linu, the destruction that he caused coming off the bench. But they were just great to watch.
Yeah, totally, mate. The best attacking team in the competition. Just so fun to watch the offloads. The crazy bits of play we got to see from Manu Tedesco. Sam Walker in that stage at the back end of the year where he really turned it on. Just such a great year to watch from the Sydney Roosters. In regards to some of the gains they get for next year, obviously he's already at the club and he's played a game, but Mark Nwanga-Nitawase need to practice that one a few times in the mirror before a game. But he obviously came over from the Wallabies and from the Waratahs too. So he comes into this team. Chad Townsend obviously coming over as well from the Cowboys, but it'll be interesting to see what role he plays in this Roosters side, obviously with some dramas around Sandon Smith. He might hop in and play regular first grade too. We just don't know. But the big losses for me, and they're all huge losses, is Suwali, Warrior Hargreaves, Manu, Kiri, and Tupanua. Mate, that is probably the hardest hitting amount of losses out of any team in the comp.
Yeah, that's huge, isn't it? Like we've seen Penrith over the last couple of seasons lose players here and there, but not in a massive big chunk like that. And just the quality of the players that they're losing. They are your absolute upper echelon guys that are gone. So, it will be interesting. Like you said, with Channing Townsend coming in, he might have accidentally found himself running out, starting at 7, depending on how things go, and with Sam Walker's rehab and everything. Mark coming in as well. It was fun to watch him score a try pretty much off his first touch. I have practiced the pronunciation of his name quite a bit, but I think at this point, like you said, we're a couple of hours in. I don't know how the English is going to be going at this point. I think I might struggle. I don't know if we need any block or roach going on, but no, there has been some huge losses. I think out of all those, your Kiri and your Warrior Hargraves are the ones that really stand out for me. Just the leadership and experience that those two have. You got your most cap player there, and Warrior Hargraves, the intensity and everything he's brought. God, he did it all the way to the end. He was still just an absolute menace. So yeah, a bit of a sad one to see him go because I think he's a dying breed when it comes to the front rowers that are built like him. That just won't take a step back, and he did never change the way he played. But yeah, they've freed up about $15 billion in the salary cap, it seems. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they do with it.
Yeah, 100%, mate. It is going to be interesting to see who they go for going into this off season, particularly when November 1 hits. But yeah, you're losing a ton of experience there. Even Manu as well, a guy that's so versatile. When Tedesco was injured throughout the year, he would hop in, or when Tedesco was out during origin periods, he'd hop into that fullback jersey as well. So losing a guy like that, is going to be massive. In saying that, Tedesco is probably not playing too much more origin with Edwards taking that jersey off him as well. So I guess it's a pretty nice time for Manu to step out in regards to the versatility factor. But you are left to sort of put together a new centre pairing, as well as finding, who that 6 is going to be for next year. Assuming that Sam Walker's the 7 of the future. And then obviously with Tupanua dropping out as well, it does free up a spot, but I'm not too concerned about that. I mean, they've got a plethora of forwards to pick from there, and a lot of guys that were unlucky to miss out do get an opportunity to push for that spot. It's going to be a big pre-season for me for the Roosters. Tell me, mate, who is your shining light?
Oh, shining light for the Roosters. Oh, who do I write down? I should remember this one off the top of my head. Angus Crichton. Big Gus. What a resurgence he's had. For everyone that knows kind of the ups and downs that he's had over the last couple of years in his personal life, and I guess even within the NRL and form, just for him to turn up to pretty much be the best second rower in the world, I'd just about say at this point, or at least for this season. He was outstanding for a club, for New South Wales. He was destructive. He's just an absolute weapon. And playing for Australia now, so he's really reaped the rewards. He'd be a shining light for me. He was just, it was a pleasure to watch.
Mate, I'm going to test your rugby league knowledge here. So Angus Crichton and Connor Watson were the 2nd and 3rd players ever to go from playing New South Wales Cup stages throughout the year to making Origin. Who was the first?
Oh.
Also a Rooster.
Also a Rooster.
Yep, played a bit of centre this year.
You got the cogs turning now. How the hell would that have? Looking at this team. Wasn't Suoli, was it?
No, wasn't Suoli.
Oh, I think you've stumped me there.
I stumped you there. Do you want to give you the answer?
Yeah, give us the answer. What we got?
Michael Jennings.
I was just looking at that as well, and I was like, it's probably an older player. There you go. Yeah, wouldn't have that.
Yeah, Michael Jennings. I saw that stat a little bit earlier in the year when those boys made Origin, but I think they're the 2nd and 3rd players ever to go from playing New South Wales Cup at the start of the year, or at least throughout the year, to go and play State of Origin. So it just goes to show how big of a season both of those guys had. I mean, Angus Crichton and Connor Watson, you probably take it that step further. Well, not so much for Connor Watson, but certainly for Angus Crichton. Not only does he play Origin, but he goes on and plays Australia again after starting the year in New South Wales Cup. Obviously didn't go to Vegas too for the big round 1 or round 0, if you like, over there. So definitely a huge improvement from him. And with everything that he's gone through, it's just such a great thing to see Angus Crichton playing good footy and being the best back rower probably in the competition this year as well. And Connor Watson, what a season that he's had as well.
He's won exactly like you highlighted, going from the New South Wales Cup all the way through that blue side. It's unreal. And he had a really unlucky run of injuries and was struggling to even find spot in the team, even when he was at the Knights. To try to find some consistent footy, and he's just been the ultimate 14, hasn't he? He's been Mr. Fix-It and been able to do everything for them, and it's just been amazing to see him go so well.
It has been, mate. It has been. I am so excited to, see how both of these guys go next year as well. Other than those two, mate, is there any other shining lights that come to mind for you?
Having a look at this team, Sam Walker. What he was able to string together was pretty good. Let me see. Nothing out of the ordinary. I would say Teddy. He's gone well. I think one that's had quite a good season was Victor Radley.
Mm.
I think he went well. Particularly, I can't believe him playing with that like broken shoulder the last couple games. What a mad man! But yeah, he had a great season. But no, definitely Gus would be the strong standout for me.
100%. Yeah, Gus definitely stands out the most. I think that definitely Victor Radley had a strong year, particularly getting shoved out onto the edge and doing a job out there when Connor Watson was playing a bit of 13. Sammy Walker with the season that he had, just putting everything on a string towards the back end of the year. That performance against the Dolphins was insane. Scored those 2 tries in the opening 10 minutes. But just some great games throughout the year as well. I am going to throw another one at you, mate. I think that Terrell May was huge this year. He spoke about it at the start, but
yeah, no, sorry, keep going, boys.
So you spoke about him at the start, but I think it just has been such a big year for him and Impact Player of the Year, RPLA in the discussion to get into that, nominations for Dally M as well. To be very close to making Origin. We were surprised at the start when Spencer Leniu made Origin over him, particularly with Spencer Leniu being out for such an extended period at the start of the year. But yeah, Terrell May, what a season he's strung together.
Yeah, he was elite. Like his impact coming off, and even the games where they had various players out. He was playing a good part of 80 minutes for some of those games. Like the motor on that guy is just next level. Like it kind of reminds me in a way of Payne Haas, just that size, but then just being able to go and go and go. It was just great. I think I even saw. I don't know if he was speaking about this season or another one where he's talking about falling kind of in and out of the love of the game and wanting to actually play and be there. So for him to kind of pull it all together and have the season that he's had. In a way, a little bit of a breakout type of season. There are, like you said, a few different spots available in that team next year. So depending on how pre-season goes, you might find he slots into that side. So very impressive.
But a lot of people might not know this as well, but he was at the Tigers for a stage there, and no one really knew he was coming through the great. Obviously, we saw Taylor May and how well he was going, but I think that Terrell May, and no disrespect to him at all, was sort of the forgotten brother there over at the Tigers. No one knew that he was really in the squad. I think he would have played a handful of games for the Tigers at best, if any. But certainly coming through and coming through strong at the Roosters and having such a strong year off the bench. It will be interesting to see how this forward pack is shaped up next year, mate. But certainly some guys that impressed. Terrell May was one of them. Spencer Leniu, another. Jared's going to be a big loss. Lindsay Collins probably had a very rough end to the year after Origin. I think that he certainly was good before that, but after Origin, definitely had a bit of a fall off. You've got the Butcher Boys of Grimsby there in the side as well, that are just waiting to come through. You have got, if I'm looking through this list as well, the Fa'u White stands out to me. Certainly a plethora of guys to pick from there for the Roosters for the pack.
Yeah, very deep with that. I guess it's really the back line that they're going to need to fill in a lot. But again, they got all the money in the world to play with, so we'll see what happens there. But there's plenty that were impressive throughout the season, so it'll be interesting to see where they do land next year. With the amount of outs that they're going to have.
Yeah, mate. Look, totally. Where do you see the Roosters finishing next year? Are they a top 4 threat for you? Do they drop off a little bit? What's the story with the Roosters?
I think we surely see a drop off with the quality and the amount of players that are leaving that club. I still see them making the 8. I've got them between 6 to 8. I think they're still going to be competitive, but I'd be amazed if we saw them, up there in the top 4 pushing for that again. That would be unreal. But yeah, I reckon towards the end of the top 8.
Yeah, look, to be honest, I think that they're probably going to struggle. To be honest, I think that look, you spoke about it just then. The plethora of the guys that they're losing in this side, the experience that they're losing, the fact that they're going to have to rebuild this back line. Sam Walker might not be back for round one. I don't think he will be back for round one. Sandon Smith, obviously the dramas around him. If he's out, they're going to just have more dramas there trying to fill that 5'8" jersey. Chad Townsend you'd think would come in, but in regards to filling the other spot, it's really up for grabs. So this really could be a tough start to the year for the Roosters, and just filling different spots in this side. If we do see that lack of discipline from them again, as well, it could be a really rough sort of year. So give me 8 to 12 for the Roosters. If they make it for me, they just make it. But I think they could drop out of the 8 for sure. I think that they could be a big drop off here for the Sydney Roosters, and I know that my dad's side of the family would not like hearing that one. Say that for free.